And welcome to the CTG Para Mentorship Pilot Program webinar number 1, the full Parasport picture with Joe Millage from Play to Podium. My name is Eric Belahov. You've gotten a lot of emails from me in the past few months, and I'm joined by my colleague Mercedes Watson. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge the land on which the CAO operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded. We ask everyone to remain on mute for the duration of the webinar. You can unmute during the breakout sessions. If you have any questions, you can also type them in the chat. You can also message Coaches Ontario privately in the chat if you have any tech issues. All right, so Joe, if you want to switch to the next slide, please. Perfect. Joe Millage, so tonight our speaker, Joe Millage, has extensive coaching experience, including Paralympic and Olympic athletes. He is currently building the sport of sitting volleyball across Ontario. Joe is a director of Parasport Ontario from 2014 to 2019. Joe was also a director of the Canadian Paralympic Foundations from 2009 to 2012. He has won the Robert W. Jackson Award of Distinction in 2019 and is on the Golf Association of Ontario Wall of Recognition as a builder in 2019. Finally, Joe was presented with Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 by the Honorary Jim Flaherty. Also on the line, we are joined by 4 Paralympic ambassadors who will give you an introduction of themselves shortly. Marissa Papaconstantinou, Jolan Wong, Bradley Bowden, and Todd Keirstead. Thank you for joining us, ambassadors. Now over to you, Joe.
Thank you. And I can't say enough about how impressed I am with the commitment of the people online. And when I looked at some of the names, I know how long some of you have been up to. As a matter of fact, at least one of you, I think I've known since you were 4 years old. So, and seen you develop into a premier coach. So that's amazing to watch. Tonight, we're going to look at a lot of things. Our motto is that there's a sport for everybody. And that we all have the right to enjoy the sports and activities of our choice right in the communities where we live. I'd like to dedicate tonight to one of our great coaches who passed last year. John Monroe did a lot of great things, including chairing the Parasport Games when Kingston hosted them. But I think the reason he fell in love with creating opportunities for others was because he fell in love with a great coach. And his wife, Vicki Keith, is going to be on the call tonight as well. Just got back from a classification. So, Vicki, our heart's with you, and we miss John a lot. My background, and we'll probably touch on this a little bit over the night, but is from hockey. I was a typical Ontario kid who grew up in an era when you got concussed, they sprayed a little water on you and sent you back out to next shift. Went to U of T. Thank God it was a great phys ed program, but I went there to play hockey and ended up quitting in my first year and moving over to rugby, which I had never played before, and played 4 years of varsity rugby and went on to coach there. And from there, I got a job at George Brown College and Queen Street Mental Health Center in rehab. Where that tied in was that a big part of what I did was people with mental health issues. Todd can relate to this because a lot of people can end up with physical issues as a result, or vice versa. And I ended up with 6 people that I was training who had physical impairments because of failed suicide attempts. And through them, I was looking for ways of getting them involved in sport, became more involved with parasport, and particularly with a coach, Paralympic coach named Dr. Graham Ward, who asked me to go and start some programs for him at a place called Variety Village that they were just finishing. And I went out there and spent 25 of the best years of my life there. So that's where some of these things will go. We're going to talk about how we motivate people and recruit people who don't sign up. all of you who are taking this program, one of the things that you share is that you're open-minded and you want to include people, but it's not going to be enough to put up a poster or a posting somewhere saying, hey, you're welcome here. You're going to have to do a little bit more than that when it comes to recruitment. And you also have to think about how you motivate people to embrace outside of the norm. And we'll talk about a little bit about the classification system. It's been a personal pet peeve of mine that so many of the athletes who begin, and we've got a couple of tremendous Paralympians in Marissa and Bradley on the call tonight, who both have, their physicality has been since birth. And when they came in onto the scene, their parents looked at these beautiful little babies, but didn't necessarily know about what athletics would lay ahead for them. So it's interesting to look at that and to talk about how sometimes people may not understand what their road to excellence may look like. So again, we will be talking about the variety of physical, sensory, intellectual expressions, and how so many of them provide significant challenges. The truth is, the possibilities are endless. And if we started looking at every classification that we could talk about, no way could you do it in 90 minutes. As a matter of fact, you couldn't cover a classification system for track and field in 90 minutes. It would take more than that with what they've got. So there are some unique people in the pictures here. Somewhere in that big picture at the bottom, you'll see Jolan as well with her daughter. She's holding her daughter there, right behind this short, heavy set guy in a purple shirt who happens to be me. But you look at it, we've got Nico in the corner, Shane in the top, and we'll talk about people with how they joined the ranks of parasports, where that fit, and how it shapes up. We'll talk about the power of connectivity, how the network of coaches that you're coming together just in this group of, the 30 or 40 people who are on this call tonight, the resources that are there. And Mr. Broughton, I hope you don't mind me mentioning you, but you literally grew up and your entire life has been one of inclusion. So what is a norm for you is certainly not the case for everyone else. And I'm sure you've run into that, whether it's in the baseball world or whether it's in the other sports that you've been coaching along the way. These are just some short things, but it very quickly, the first one, Mom Told. One of the pictures that you'll be looking at and somebody you might hear a little bit about was born as a beautiful, healthy baby and months later developed a significant fever. And when they went to the hospital, the doctor very quickly came out and said to Mom, will you sign here and give me permission to amputate all 4 of your child's limbs and take out part of their face? And when she said to that doctor, can I think about it overnight? His answer was, ma'am, in the morning, all you'll tell me is where the funeral will be. So in those few hours, things change. We look at people with a mountain bike crash who, just things they've done 1,000 times, jumping a log, coming down a mountain, going over the handlebars, and all of a sudden they hit their forehead, their neck snaps, and life has changed for them. Youth have told they've had bone cancer. There's several. Jolan Wong is on the call. She would have been probably in grade 8 when she got that diagnosis. Another athlete who I had the pleasure of coaching was the first he was the second rotation plasty in Canada, Jamie Truer, and with a Van Ness amputation, and he later went on to he made the men's national wheelchair basketball team. And you look at things like watching bones that don't harden, and Marissa can say, everything's perfect except for that one leg that didn't quite, do what the other leg did. A middle school athlete, and I wish Ashley will talk about her story a little bit, but she got into sitting volleyball and she's quite good at it and she likes it. And it's pretty rare to see people with CP playing sitting volleyball, but she loves running. and she was very good at running, but she fell a lot. So her teacher in grade 7 told her he really didn't think she should continue with that. And thank God that to the internet today that she was able to go on and find some other people who had similar classification running in the Paralympics and at nationals where they posted videos. And power wheelchair athletes. Not rare for a power wheelchair to be now cross the $40,000 or $50,000 price tag. So parents get a little leery when Johnny or Sally want to go out and play power hockey in that chair. And of course, child with the autism spectrum who, deals with things that others may find annoying. And one of the ones, and Todd, you heard when Ontario first hosted the Disability Open in golf, there was a man who literally could not stand still for more than maybe 90 seconds, and he'd slap his thighs, spin around, do everything else. But I think he's about a 6 cap, and he can certainly play golf. It's just a matter of the game coming to terms with him on his level. So again, there's a lot of those kinds of things in this picture. We will talk later a little bit about sitting volleyball. And this is a group in Durham that came out and played. Jolan taught them a little bit, but they came out and got involved. That was one of the things they did that day, and it certainly has changed things for many of those athletes. We talk about working with people with challenges. First of all, it doesn't matter what sport. Anybody who deals with elite athletes is dealing with challenges all the time. Parasports, maybe we're dealing with more physical, are classifiable challenges, but anybody who achieves a high level of excellence they're above everyone else literally, and they have demands that change, and the way that they train and the way that they eat and the expenses that they run into are something that their families learn to deal with, usually embrace. But sometimes when the sports are on the outside, there may be some questions about some of those things. Here's some of the people that have gone on. Again, when you talk about a rotation plasty, James in the bottom corner, I don't know whether you guys can see my mouse, but what that surgery involves is cutting above the knee and below the knee, turning the foot. That is his foot that's in the top of his prosthetic limb. That also happens to be a great position in his golf swing, right? Other people, Nico, we mentioned at the top, people who are running. Shane, this is him playing wheelchair basketball. And I know Coach Frog couldn't get on the call tonight, but when Shane first came around and Coach Steve Balois was telling people at higher levels about his capacity, and they heard he was a quadruple amp, they weren't jumping at the opportunity to involve them. In the bottom corner is Jeff Adams, one of our most decorated athletes. Tracy Ferguson, who from the time she was 11 through today is dealing with shattered Harrington rods in her back that are like shrapnel. And what she dealt with to perform on the level she did is just incredible. So today, some of the things that we're going to do is talk about increasing your comfort. And I'm not assuming that you're uncomfortable, but there's some of those areas that maybe we're not all expert in. So we learn from others. We're going to emphasize that you can't have all the answers. It's impossible. But the desire, to me, is every bit as important as design. And if you want people included in your program, you'll figure out a way to do it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll just recruiting tools and how that works. Broaden your options and knowledge of where you can find support that also includes equipment. If you're looking for someone to access a hand cycle or a specialty wheelchair or any other specialty piece of equipment, right, which can include, Team Osur has, there's a lot of things that they do in the way of prosthetics that are not what you would see every day when you look. And not just running blades that we've become more familiar with, but a lot of things that allow someone to hold an implement or things like that as well. In the world of golf, there's a number of grips that are now available to people that come out. Okay. And the big thing, I hope that at the end tonight that you find out that you have the connections to get you what you need, but also connections going forward when something new springs up, you're comfortable in handling it. Okay, so now we're going to let the ambassadors introduce themselves a little bit, say a little bit about their story, and just let you know some of the people that are available tonight that we can call on. Okay, so Brad, if you don't mind going first.
All right, can you hear me? Well, that's handy. You've got everything up there. Yeah, so my name's Brad Bowden, and I'm from the Orangeville area. I was born with a disability called sacral agenesis, and I was raised by my grandparents. And I'm 38 this year, so I was raised during a time when internet wasn't available, and I was lucky enough to have a grandmother that was very stubborn and eager to kind of hook me up with things that I was passionate about. And I think she noticed at a young age that I really was competitive, and I loved hockey and I loved sport and playing outside with my friends. So she ended up getting me in touch with a wheelchair basketball program. And there's a million things that happened in my life, but to sum it all up, I guess I ended up finding my way into a tournament with a team, just a starter team. And then I ended up going to a tournament at Variety Village where I was selected for a Rookie of the Year award that Sunrise Medical offered, which hooked me up with my first wheelchair basketball chair. And for me, that was really the start of that chair was just really a catalyst for my passion to grow and kind of get excited about what was possible for me in sport. And through that, I met several different people, such as Joe, and I met, a coach named Jeff Penner from Kitchener who got me into competitive basketball. And through Jeff and the program there, I got into sledge hockey. And yeah, that basically kind of led me towards finding a way for me to take all of this competitive stuff that I like to do and activities that I enjoyed to do in sport, and found just this way of me being able to be a part of a team and getting to play a sport that I always loved to do, and always had to play by myself and adapt. And I always got, run over by able-bodied friends and stuff. So it was cool. It just kind of led me down a path to other avenues like sledge hockey, which I ended up falling in love with too. And yeah, ended up taking it pretty far. And now I work for a non-for-profit called All Sports, All People, where I get to kind of give back to the communities and teach other kids about things that they could get passionate about, and hopefully make a small impact in their lives and help them kind of have the success that I had.
Brad, I think that sometimes people can hear a story like yours and they look at how strong you are and think that it was an easy route. Maybe just a quick insight. I think it was the first time that you were going to the Sledge Hockey World Championships, or maybe the Paralympics, that you encountered a thumb injury. Just maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up getting I was looking to go to my first Paralympics in Salt Lake City, and we were in Oslo, Norway. And I had at that point fought and improved to try to get some playing time and get some ice time, and finally found myself on, like a power play line and so forth. And we were in a prep tournament, and I just had a freak accident where somebody turned and T-boned, which is when somebody uses the front of their sled and hits the side of your sled with the front end. But it just happened to push my hand into my own skate blade, and it pretty much took away any chance of me being able to play in my first Paralympic Games. So that was a pretty tough moment in my life, but I never took being able to play sledge hockey for granted after that, I'll tell you. But it hasn't been an easy road, and I know some of you know my story and some of you don't, but it was interesting for sure. Ups and downs.
And people will have a chance to ask Bradley some questions later. And one of the things that Mercedes and Eric have set up is that after the presentation tonight, the ambassadors are going to be just available in a cocktail reception. I wish I could pour you guys a drink afterwards, and then we could have a beer together or something, but we can do that virtually. But there will be casual time to speak as well. Thank you, Bradley. Next is Jolan Wong. Jolan, can you tell us a bit about your route?
Hey, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Jolan Wong, and I'm a member of the Canadian women's sitting volleyball team. I've been with the team for 13 years, and during that time, I've competed in 2 World Championships, 2 Pan American Games, and the Rio 26 Paralympics. Right now, I'm currently training for the Tokyo Paralympic Games to be held this summer, fingers crossed. My journey to become a Paralympian started at the age of 13 when I was diagnosed with osteogenic sarcoma, which is the same bone cancer that Terry Fox had. So with that, I had the amputation of my right leg. And I grew up in a really small farming town in Alberta, so there wasn't a ton of opportunity for parasport there, and I didn't know about the Paralympics or anything until I was 18, and my high school volleyball coach approached Volleyball Canada saying they had someone with a physical impairment on their team and was wondering if there was a different form of volleyball for me to play, essentially. And sitting volleyball was just starting in Canada. So I'm like one of the original members of the Canadian women's sitting volleyball team. So that's my sport journey. But when I'm not training and competing, I'm homeschooling my 2 kids and helping my husband run a brewery and bringing awareness to parasport across the country with the help of Joe.
I'm not looking for the plugs, but I'll tell you, Jolan, last year there was the first time where an international elite volleyball coaching symposium was held at the University of Ottawa. And we had the privilege of presenting there. Jolan did a fantastic job. And her coach, Ban, is also just a phenomenal coach who really believes in her athletes. And incidentally, just so we know, one of the things I want to mention now, we look at where Paralympians come from. And in Jolan's case, and Jolan, I quite frankly, the type of cancer you had is far more prevalent in boys than it is in girls. And it was an 80% death rate until that surgery came along and reversed those numbers. And, so we see things that are quantum, they change the deal. And right now, like, I have seen where earthquakes hit in Armenia and all of a sudden 10,000 people are rendered amputees and they do things. We saw for decades where polio or thalidomide affected things. And right now we're undergoing the largest vaccination program ever undertaken in the world. And we really don't know what the long-term impacts of that are. And it's the same with COVID, that some of the variants seem to have a stronger thing for something called Kawasaki's disease, which could again be something that creates where a lot more people are going to need their activities modified a little bit to be able to enjoy them. So what all the participants, what you're looking at tonight is really something that you can't predict what's going to happen 6 months down the road. And if you look at it, I mean, there was a hockey team in Humboldt, and I think, Brad, 3 of those players are now playing sledge hockey, and one of them's playing at a national team level?
I know Straz is involved in a capacity with the national team right now, but the other ones were just playing kind of rec sledge hockey and kind of feeling it out and doing some ski stuff too and all that. So I'm not too sure where they're at, but I know Straz is involved quite a bit.
Cool. Thank you, Jolan. And now Marissa, here's a picture of her, should be a bigger picture. Just one of our, maybe my favorite track athlete in the world right now. But on top of that, Marissa, can you just tell us a bit of your story and how you got to where you are?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I first started running at 12 years old when I got my first running blade. But prior to that, I was really into a lot of different sports. I did soccer, basketball, skiing, tennis, gymnastics. My parents just really encouraged me to try anything I really wanted, just to see what I was really passionate about and what I really liked. But track was always very interesting to me. I was always very infatuated by the sport and the athletes that did it. And so I had wanted a running blade ever since I was a little girl. And when I had that opportunity, when I was 12, when that became available to me, I joined a local track club right away. And by the age of 13, I had broken the Canadian record for the 100 meter amongst women in Canada. with the amputation below the knee on one side. So I think that was kind of like my aha moment where I realized that I could push for a lot further in the sport. And so that is when I had made my goal to compete at Rio in 2016. And so I competed at my first Paralympic Games at 16 years old. So it's been quite a journey over the last few years. There's been a lot of ups and downs. I've had a few major injuries. I got DQ'd for my Paralympic debut race for stepping on the line in the 200 after qualifying for the final. There's been a lot of tough goes, but currently training for Tokyo and feeling very, very good, very strong. So I'm really looking forward to what's to come this season. I mean, it is kind of very up and down right now. I'm currently in California training at the Olympic Training Center at Chula Vista, with some meets up in the next couple weeks to prepare. But having said that, there is so much uncertainty, especially back home in Canada right now. I heard that Ontario, I'm from Toronto, is on lockdown again. So there is a lot of uncertainty with that when I go home, and just like racing opportunities, and if we're going to have even a national championships. Having said that, I'm just kind of going with the punches and just taking everything day by day and enjoying the process. This has been a very exhausting last year, I'm sure, for a lot of people, but just trying to, again, enjoy that process. And yeah, it's written there, but I was also born missing my right foot. So I'm a congenital foot amputee.
Marissa, maybe just a quick comment about tuning your blade, because obviously you can't have one leg running faster than the other. That's not going to work real well. So how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, earlier on in my career in 2013, 2014, we spent a lot of time in and out of Holland View to really fine tune the blade to how I needed it to be. It was quite frustrating, especially as a young child, to like kind of navigate that space that, I'm working with a prosthetist that didn't have very much experience previously with working with running blades. So we were also navigating that space together. Still working with her today, and she has learned a lot and knows a lot about me now. But it takes a lot of fine tuning when it comes to the blade stiffness, when it comes to the angles, whether you want more quote unquote toe, less toe, the knee angle, the hip angle, everything has to be perfectly in line so that when you are sprinting full out, the blade is compressing equally to your sound side. So spent a lot of years trying to perfect that. And looking back, although it was pretty frustrating during those times, I'm glad we spent that time on it, because now I have a formula that has worked for me for many years now, and we kind of don't really mess around with it too much.
Very, very cool. And when we talk about tuning equipment, and thank you, Marissa, Todd was a professional golfer who got into being a trick shot, a show artist, and then from there learned that a lot of what he did applied to other people, and that really became his specialty. You can see by the right side of the page. And I'm just going to have Todd just tell you a little bit about himself as well, and how golf has come about. Todd?
Well, good evening, everyone. Parasport actually found me a little bit later on in life. For the last 20 years, I've been a professional golfer. As Joe said, traveled around the world doing golf entertainment, trick shots, helping raise millions of dollars for charities at different events. Then back in, I got voted Trick Shot of the Year on the Golf Channel, been on ESPN Sport, been on TMZ 4 different occasions, and not in a scandalous fashion. So we'll get that out of the way right away. But back in 2014, my life changed instantly. I did a demonstration for a veterans hospital outside of Tampa, Florida. And it became apparent that a lot of the shots I was hitting for pure entertainment value was actually emulating the wounded veterans that were in attendance. I was hitting golf balls blindfolded. I looked out, there were individuals that were affected with mustard gas in the Vietnam War. I was hitting golf balls swinging with one arm. Looked out, there were arm amputees. Hitting golf balls standing on one leg amputees. Hitting golf balls off my knees, double leg amputees. Even hitting golf balls out of a Costco fold-out chair. There were guys that were affected in Afghanistan that lost the use of their legs. So it immediately turned the light bulb on for me that instead of golf being more entertainment, it turned into more of a motivating and inspirational, because I was showing individuals that yes, maybe you can't play the sport the way that you used to, but we're going to figure out an adaptive way to play. So the first thing I did when I got back from Tampa was I went and saw a very good friend of mine who has a prosthetic leg and had actually one sitting in the closet. I said, "Do you mind if I borrow it?" And what I did is I went and got it fitted. Now I'm fully able-bodied, but I went and got it fitted for myself, having my leg bent on a 90-degree right angle, and they cast my leg, so I was able to put myself in an adaptive situation. Whether it was hitting golf balls, now instead of that Costco fold-out chair, it was out of a wheelchair. Instead of standing on one leg, I was able to use the prosthetic limb. So the thing about it was I was putting myself in the situation that these people were giving them inspiration that, yes, you can't play the way that you used to, but we're going to figure out an adaptive way to play. Then in 2017, the Invictus Games rolled around in Toronto. They wanted to introduce golf as a sport. So there was nobody doing adaptive golf in Canada at the time, really. So they invited me in as part of the organizing committee. So I was involved in 17 in Toronto, where 550 wounded veterans came to Toronto to compete in the games. Had the privilege of spending 45 minutes with Prince Harry, talking to him about the power of golf, working with their wounded veterans. And then I had really the US military over the last 4 years. Unfortunately, due to COVID, my travel restrictions have been brought to a halt. But over the last 4 years, I've had the privilege of traveling around the world with all branches of the US military, working with their wounded veterans, everywhere from Japan, South Korea, Germany, Italy, all through the US, and helping out, just showing that, you know what, golf is a sport for everybody. Now I have probably the strongest team of para golfers in Canada, but also doing grassroots development programs. I was just talking with Archie Allison today. We're going to be rolling stuff out at Variety, all the way to the best golfers in the world.
Excellent. And one of those golfers, and again, we're going to talk a little bit about the pyramid for parasport, because it's so different than other sports that people enter it. So for most of the coaches on the line and the mentors, you're experts in early physical literacy. But that can change, and then it changes again when someone has to learn to remove and to move in a different way because something has changed. Some of the other stuff that Todd has dealt with a lot is understanding the needs of persons with mental health issues. And one of the things I sat with the Surgeon General one time, and his assistant said to me how, they appreciated that when a veteran was repatriated, when they came home and had been killed in Afghanistan or wherever, that people lined up and draped, flags off bridges and other things. But what he told me was that they weren't doing that for people who came back with injuries. And that so often those people were shipped home to their 22 or 23-year-old wife, and the two of them were left to figure out how they would deal with what they had to. And those same kinds of things are encountered a lot. We hear every sport now has a policy on dealing with concussions, on dealing, but head injuries can involve very different things. And I know that myself, one of the best things that I ever did was be connected with Dr. Arlette Lefebvre at Sick Kids Hospital, who really gave me an understanding far beyond what any other coach could do. And so when you're looking at your resources, you have to think outside the box. And, as I said, when desire is there, when you want to include someone, that's where you will find some of those things. So what we're going to spend the next 10 minutes doing, and Mercedes is going to put you into groups, and each of our ambassadors is going to go and listen and commit and contribute, of course, and maybe take a few notes that you can bring back to the whole group. But what I want you to think about is what got you started in sport? And did you ever have a passion for a sport that your parents never tried? My dad never missed a hockey game, but he never saw me play rugby. He never saw me wrestle, because those weren't sports that he was really familiar with. Have you taken up a sport because you had a physical advantage? because a lot with the classification, one of the things that happens so often is that people, and talk to your ambassadors about what classifications they deal with, because so often we don't recognize that, like when Bradley played wheelchair basketball, the players that often make the biggest difference on the international stage are the people who are classified at 0.5, 1, or 1.5, who functionally are quadriplegics. But you can't have a 3.5 on the floor if you don't have a 1.5 to match up with them. So you look at things, and there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily communicate well to people. So we're going to break out now. Each of you is going to go to a room, and look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, everyone, you will be moved automatically. Don't be startled when it happens. So in 3, 2, 1.
So why don't we, who wants to go first? Why don't we go for, Jolan, why don't you start us off? What did your group talk about?
Sure. We talked a lot about our integration and how we kind of started into sport. For most people, it was family tagging along with siblings, and just, I guess, their parents kind of streamlining them to stay off the streets, if you will. So just keeping them busy, keeping them active. And then we had a few people that were just kind of just born with it, just born with the need to play sport. And I'm definitely one of those people that just, I don't know, sport is my education that most people strive for. And yeah, so that one really spoke to me. And then just going through, like, trying to find your sport. So so many people tried a lot of different sports, from like bowling to dragon boat racing, like just a full spectrum before they found what their true love and passion was.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about your group, Marissa?
We touched upon similar topics, just around like how everyone got into sport. I would say it was pretty 50-50. Some were kind of integrated with family, so it was kind of passed down, and then others were learning about it later on. I thought it was really interesting. We chatted a little about boxing and how that is starting to become more accessible with parasports. So that was something that was really interesting that we chatted about, and making that space a little more accessible. And yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Cool. Bradley?
Yeah, I'd say that from most of the stories that I heard, and I could find it extremely relatable given my situation being an ex-athlete with injuries, and that the consensus seemed to be that most people lost the ability to play something that they were passionate about through their sport, and found a new way of giving back, and whether it be through hockey or through taekwondo or through wheelchair basketball, or picking up where people left off. And there was one gentleman in our group that was saying that they took over a basketball program, and a lot of people in our group just giving back to the sport. And we had somebody also mentioned that they weren't as interested in sport growing up, and their family wasn't too keen on it, but she still is here and she's interested in giving back and getting involved. So basically just the message was, we want to give back and continue to do what we can to stay involved.
Cool. And Todd?
I think the big thing that I took away is really sport is who they all are. Like the passion just came through the screen with the stories, the moments of wasn't great at sports, but was stubborn enough to keep on trying and persevere and make it happen. And a few have had to find their actual calling in the sport that they love. But the same thing as Brad's group is they just want to give back and give their experience and give their knowledge back and make people better really than who they were, and learning from their mistakes and being able to pass on the wisdom.
I got to listen to your group a little bit, and when Sue Bartol was talking, it was so cool to hear her talk about not just her story, but then taking her daughter to a track club and seeing a girl who was going through kind of the same thing she went through, and feeling the empathy to help that girl figure it out. And so much of what parasport is about is just that. As we look at this picture in the summary page, the little girl on the very left, born at well under a kilogram. She's probably never going to play hockey holding a stick, but she gets to go to the initiation with her twin sister and they have a great time at it. The boy in the top right, if you haven't seen that, that's called Volt hockey. And a quick search, just when we look at what opportunities are there, internationally, there are 43 designations of different types of hockey. So go figure that one out, from rollerblading to Volt hockey. It's there. So cool. Thank you, everybody, for your participation there. I'm going to talk for a few minutes just about that, about why we begin and where we begin and how we begin again. And so often, one of the things that people don't necessarily understand, when I started working in the field, a guy named Pauls Biernovsky was starting the sport of what then was called murder ball wheelchair rugby. And it was a sport specifically built for people who were quadriplegics, people who had broken their necks. All four limbs were affected. The one thing almost all of those athletes had in common, they weren't sedentary people in their life. They got hurt cliff diving at Fenland Falls. They got hurt diving off roofs into backyard pools, and horseback riding, and racing cars and motorcycles and things. So what was really tough about them dealing with their disability was having people look at them in light of what they couldn't do. And that entire sport came about. They want wheelchairs that make the loudest noise possible when they collide. They want to crash and bang, and they really wanted it. They liked the name murder ball. They switched to rugby for mostly funding purposes. But during the Pan Am Games, it was stated that wheelchair rugby is one of the fastest growing games now. We talk about when people enter, with the people here who have been around wheelchair basketball, we've got past national team coaches, we've got people who've done a lot with it, people who have played in the Paralympics at that level. But it used to be that the teams recruited at the rehab hospitals. The truth is that now most people who break their backs where they're paraplegics, where only their lower body is affected, because of better care, because of air ambulances, because of induced acomas where you don't move involuntarily, and all of that, they're leaving the hospital. It's still a life-altering disability, but they're much higher functioning than they used to be. So that group are not the group that are currently filling the ranks of wheelchair basketball. Rugby, on the other hand, is growing because so many people are coming out of the hospital when they have higher spinal cord injuries, and they're coming out again at a higher level of function. So we're seeing more people designated as quads who are doing sit skiing, who are playing rugby, who are using arm cycles, who are doing other things like that. So there is a big difference. There's also issues, and when you look at it, with early physical literacy, there are a lot of disabilities where children, if it's a congenital issue, your parents are spending the first 5 years of your life just trying to figure things out. And, if a child, a little girl is born and she's going to play soccer, or she's going to run, or she's going to skip, or she's going to dance, and there's all these givens that parents know those sports. They're familiar with them, and they're somewhat familiar with what it takes to enjoy them. As soon as there are physical impairments involved, that all changes. And it can change quite dramatically. And a lot of times, people are somewhat abandoned. And I've got to say that I've seen kids who were more successful in parasport in spite of their parents than because of them. Kids who really figured it out for themselves and were very incredibly resilient. And then you look at the people who inquire. So if you look at something like Pogge's muscular dystrophy, the best trophy that I have ever seen given out on an annually is the Brendan Turner Award that is given to the child who gets the most joy out of participating in sport. That child who's, and Brendan had Pogge, so his parents didn't know that he had muscular dystrophy until he was 4. And unfortunately, with that disease at that time, they knew he wasn't going to see a 7th birthday. So it's a pretty rapid decline in his physical ability. And when it got to the point that he couldn't participate swimming anymore, was one of his favorite things. He used to sit at the glass window to the pool and just laugh at the joy he saw other kids having. But you can imagine how hard that kind of thing is on parents. Then you look at people who, there's the progressive diseases like MS that you usually don't find out you've got till you're in your late teens, early mid-20s or later, and the different types of MS that can hit. Things that have happened for any of you who are involved with Special Olympians. 40 years ago, someone born with Down syndrome, their life expectancy was in their mid to late 20s. Now it's full. And one of the biggest constraints that are hitting families are providing for adult children with disabilities when they're not getting government support. And so people are entering, if you understand. So you may have someone, and again, on my screen right now, Todd's up in the corner of it, and I think of Todd and one of his athletes who lets us talk about him, Ed Urquhart. And Ed was a motorcycle racer who, from my understanding, at Cayuga hit a wall at about 160 miles an hour. And he hit that wall, and his right leg was quite a ways behind him on the track, and the left leg was somewhere that he knew he'd never use it again. And his hand was torn up, and he literally, in full consciousness, said, "I hope this is going to be okay." Not only has Ed recovered, not only does he have a tremendously supportive wife and a very good family life, but his nickname is now Eddie Three Sticks, that he is Todd's premier long drive competitor, second in North America, if not the world right now, with a drive of well over 370 yards now, Todd.
He competed, he was against able-bodied people, and he was hitting at over 330 yards.
Okay, so I mean, that's hammering it out there. And he's also a competitive kayakist, and he does powerlifting as well. And that's not strange, but you look at where he came from. But he had to learn how to do those things again. When you lose your legs, you have to learn, your body changes, and you have to learn about weight transfer. Anybody who goes through an amputation and where they come through. People dealing with head injuries. When that happens, whether it's a car accident, whether it's a repetitive injury thing from soccer. By the way, the #1 sport in the world for concussion issues is girls soccer prior to them being in high school. And one of the reasons is they tend to be taller, they tend to be faster, they can kick the ball hard, and they don't have the neck structure to be heading the ball sometimes when it's coming hard. And there's a number of states right now that have banned girls in that age from heading the ball, just for their own safety. Similarly, in 3 states where testing was done, where you can picture the states, Texas being one of them, but where high school football is a religion, they have looked at high school football players, and in a study done by Dr. Daniel Amen, 100% of the athletes who played 4 years of varsity high school football have permanent brain damage. And you're looking at what we're doing, but they have to learn how to cope with that, how to cope with the headaches, how to cope with the stress around that. So when you're talking about physical literacy, you have to realize how completely all over the charts it is, and how we really need to focus down for years. And I know Meredith was at Mercedes was at a conference with me when Special O was spoken to, because they didn't start programs officially until kids were 12. And that was too late for them when you were looking at a lot of the things that you normally do with early physical literacy. And so many of the sports. So you really have to get to know the athletes, where they're coming from, and deal with the parents as far as what's available. And that's where organizations like Parasport can connect you with somebody who has maybe been on a similar path. I know that, and I know Vicki Keith is on this webinar tonight, and the athletes. I've got to say, and I'm sure many of you are probably somewhat Vicki-esque, but having been a coach and watching Vicki very closely, she was actually a mother to a lot of her athletes. She connected with them. She dealt with a lot of issues that had nothing to do with being in the pool. Her athletes, I think, often because of that nurturing, some of them, one of the young men who happens to be a blind swimmer who dealt with recurrent brain tumors, and they would always be a setback. But he has been such a huge help to other people. He was blind because of the cancer, the brain cancer that he had. But he has gone on now he's probably working on a decade of being an ambassador who has helped so many people. But he got that from Vicki. He actually moved and went to school went to college down close to where Vicki is, so he could be close to her and continue to benefit from her coaching. And it's those kind of relationships. And I got that listening to Sue. And I know in the other sections, when I get to hear more from you, that there's more of that in this group. Please never undervalue what that brings to the situation. Something I don't talk about often, of the first 10 athletes that I coached who won Paralympic medals, within 3 years of that event, 4 of them had committed suicide because of the lack of support they had in their communities. And we talk about things that, the stresses that people deal with, and how so often sport and active living opportunities are the way we deal with that stress. That for that little while you're playing your game, everything else, you're focused on really the insignificance of your game. But at that moment in time, it's all significant. And it gets all your focus, and it can really be a life changer. And don't underestimate the value you bring to people when you're helping them that way. Some of the things that we'll talk about as well is getting equipment. So here's an arm cycle. If any of you want to try it, call Parasport Ontario. We can do our best to get you one so you can try it. I can honestly say I like mountain biking. I like street biking. When I tried arm cycling, I was scared to death because I was doing it on a street and the people in the cars couldn't see me. And it didn't matter that I had a little flag on the back. I was below the level of the rearview mirror. So you got to look at where you're doing that. Some of the experts we've got around tonight are mentioned here. You've already been introduced to most of them. Coach Frogley couldn't make it tonight. Vicky's here as well. And of course, with our 4 ambassadors, we've got a lot of things covered. For this next breakout, each of the ambassadors is going to read a situation. Don't worry about saying something that is wrong. Don't worry about not having the right jargon. And I'll tell you, words absolutely matter, but they don't matter for the next 12 minutes. And I used to think they didn't matter at all until I went to work in Moscow. And at that point in time, the only word they had for people with a disability was invalida. And it meant no validity. We used to call people with certain illnesses here invalids as well. And over there was no mistaking it. It meant that you had no validity, and that included all their veterans and everybody else. So words matter, but for tonight, when you're with the coaches, please do not get hung up on words. If you have something that you want to get out on the table, get it out, bring up your ideas. Each of the coaches will read the scenario with you, and then you've got 12 minutes in your group to discuss it. Away you go. Anyway, if you guys, again, if the ambassadors would mind, again, just recapping the situation you were dealing with and then quickly mentioning some of the things that you spoke about.
All right, I can lead this again if that's okay. We had a boy that was in high school and he acquired an amputation, and he was very active before that. And he was getting back into sport. How can we help him? So a big thing that came up was connecting him with mentors, whether it was through like people we know that had gone through the same situation or who had a physical impairment. And the CHAMP program came up a lot. So there's something called the CHAMP seminar that anyone under 18, I think if you're over 18, you can go as well, but specifically under 18 can go to and connect with other amputees, which is super beneficial to see other people that are like you and to learn from their experiences. But yeah, so champs, mentors, and sending the athlete online to kind of do some research on seeing other people and what adaptive sports are out there, and what programs are out there within their region that they can connect with. And lastly was integrating an adaptive sport into the gym class so that the other classmates are adapting rather than the individual adapting to play able-bodied.
Did you talk about sitting volleyball at all?
We did a little bit.
That, you know, that actually happened in Toronto, right? With Wazif. He was one of the guys who came in and is now playing at a high level. Very good. Mm-hmm. Okay. Who wants to go next? Bradley, how about you?
Sure. Do you want me to read the whole scenario or just give you the gist of it?
You can give us the gist of it. It's fine.
So it's basically, our scenario was a young boy whose sister is involved in a hockey program, wants to get involved, and he has cerebral palsy and uses a rollator to get around. And the question was, they want to get involved. Is there any way he could be included in a program? What would you recommend? So most of the people, well, everyone was just, the answer was yes. And everyone was very positive in accommodating this idea of him being able to participate. There was some points made about involving his family, especially his young sister, which is extremely important considering that it's a lot easier for somebody to be more inclined to get involved if they've got some support from their family. We all know that. And then there were a lot of issues concerning what type of setup they might need for equipment. Being a sledge player, it's super important to think about those things because you can, you know, does he want to skate with, you know, with his walker, or does he want to sit in a sled? So there are a lot of questions to ask regarding that. So we have to figure that out as well. There were also just safety concerns as well. So there's a lot to consider as far as, you know, is it going to be safe for him to participate if he is using such equipment for the other kids as well? Because we all know that there's liabilities and safety concerns with these programs to think about. And there was another person that brought up a good point about introducing video resources to the family so that they could better understand how they want to be involved in the program and what kind of rules and safety measures are going to be associated with getting involved as well. But yeah, basically everyone was just pretty much saying, find a way to accommodate this child and make it happen, and just make sure that it's done in the most safest and positive environment. And the other stuff can be figured out as far as equipment and sleds, and just keeping that family together as well, maybe including his sister in that as well. So we're all pretty much saying the same thing, just in different ways.
No, just one of the other things, and I know, Brad, you were always so physically strong upper body wise, but one of the things with young kids getting them started in sled is just the power that it takes to propel a sled. So there's things that you can use to help somebody so that they can enjoy the skill aspects of sledge hockey without trying to actually propel the sled too far as they develop the skill. Correct?
Yeah. You could. There's a thing called the channel under your sled that can actually help. Usually, when you start out, you start with a really wide channel to help with your center of gravity. And most people don't have a very strong core, and some disabilities. Some people will never have a very strong core, so you have to adapt the equipment. And fortunately for sledge, you can change the width of the blades to help with balance. There's push bars that you can get. There's special backing for the backrest that you can get to accommodate different types of disabilities as well. And there's push bars like for people that want to stand up and skate on skates. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways to attack the problems. It's just a matter of what the child really wants to do and what the family's comfortable with trying to allow them to do as well. So.
Excellent. Okay. Marissa, what did your group come up with? What were you dealing with?
So our scenario was about a young girl who has cerebral palsy. And so she started to play sitting volleyball with a local group from Holland Bloorview. And she was actually very good at it, but her passion was in running. So she hoped to make the school cross country team, but they mentioned that she had fallen a lot and wasn't very comfortable. And her coach thought that it wasn't her best interest to get involved in running. But through looking at videos on the internet, she saw other Paralympic athletes that ran just like her. And so she wanted to know more through, some guidance at how she can get more involved with track and field. And so we kind of just said, why not welcome this athlete with open arms into the sport and just try and figure out different ways to make it work. Clearly, at the end of the day, it's really about our passion and what we are most, what we love the most. And so she really wanted to get into track and field. So the first step was, of course, creating an environment where she felt that she had a coach with her best interests at heart. And then we also said that it would be important for her to get a really good group of people around her, such as like a physiotherapist, or a strength coach, any of these types of resources that would help her, use her body in the best and most efficient way possible that would prevent her from falling as much as she experienced in the past. And clearly, she's had a hunger for success and she knows what that kind of feels like. And so you have an athlete at your hands that's basically willing to work to make it work. And so we basically said that it's really important to get her parents on the same page with her and kind of branch out and maybe attend a track meet to see other cerebral palsy athletes compete, to kind of create more comfort within that environment. And at the end of the day, it's obviously about earning her parents' trust and belief in the coach's pathway and the program so that they know that they're putting their daughter's hands in the best environment possible that's safe and also having her best interests at heart.
Fantastic stuff. You guys could write the book on that one. Really well done. Todd, how'd your group do?
It was awesome. Our scenario was a 32-year-old military veteran, returned home from heavy involvement in Afghanistan, grew up playing sports all his life, but now walks with a cane. He likes going to hockey games. He reached out to our group asking if we wanted to come over for a drink. When we did, he broke down and started crying that he was depressed and bored. Our group, we talked about playing the sports, getting him out and playing the sports. Then the focus came about what the challenges that I've faced with working with military, and that's the toughest part, and that's the invisible injuries. Being able to see a visible injury, it's a lot easier as a coach to work with that individual, but working with the invisible, the cognitive injuries is tough because you don't know what the trigger points are for that individual. As well, the last part of that sentence really hit home that he broke down in front of you. So being a veteran and being a civilian, getting that trust and bond, those were the two big words that I took from our group. Developing a trust and bond with that individual but having that individual break down, that to me shows me he's got your trust, that it's just keeping it and not breaking the trust. So the big words that I took from our group was trust and bond.
Cool. And good stuff. Again, Eric will go through at the end how, this session's been recorded, you can revisit it. But thank you, everybody. And some amazing stuff out there. I just wanted to remind you all as well that there is equipment. There's places like On Para and OCPSA and the Ontario Amputee Sports Association and Blind Sport Ontario. They all have equipment pools that they can get you equipment if you need it. Look, we'll help you get it. You can contact me. You can contact the people in the office at Parasport. They certainly have the ability to do that. I can say that, some of the sports like sitting volleyball, we've had, I'm going to get into some of the success stories, but sitting volleyball, we've had over 2,400 people participate in the year before COVID, from virtually, 20 the year before that. There's no additional cost for equipment. We can lower a net. Yeah, it's not the perfect net, but we can lower it to the right heights. We can get people involved. One high school alone had 300 people come out, and what they had in common was that they could never have been on a team. And to see what happened in the changes, again, we can write volumes on it. The teacher, that was at Sinclair High School, the teacher was Darren Lee, and what a phenomenal story as to what they did. They actually had a boy who was 100% blind in the program. And his educational assistant taught him to serve. She would stand on the other side of the net with a pie plate suspended in a hula hoop and tap on it with her fingernails, and he would try and hit the ball to the sound. And it worked. Like, what they did was phenomenal. Wheelchair basketball, and one of the things that Bradley alluded to, but the other ambassadors have touched on this as well, is so often people are isolated. They're the only person in their community with a physical manifestation that they have. And if they want to play the sport, how do they get to it? And at times, like, to listen to Jolan and what she had to do as a member of a national team who lives in a community and needs to find people and create people in that community to play with and practice with. And that's common. Certainly grew a lot because of the Invictus Games and TPAS. When we had the Pan Am Games, groups became more aware and we saw more groups starting up. There's some groups now, Whitby Minor Hockey, for several years. I don't know, well, they didn't have it this year, obviously, but where they included sled segments. And what they did, they might have had, they literally had one child who needed to use a sled, but they had extra sleds, and all the other children tried it for, 7 or 8 minutes during a practice, and it got it going. Dance, there's some really cool things. We can look at some of the things. There's our picture of the sitting volleyball nets that set up. That's at an arena in Uxbridge where we had some people there. Golf, Todd, there's Ed we talked about. The picture on the right is having role models. Tess Trojan is the world gold medalist in Special Olympics golf. This little girl traveled about 100 kilometers to meet her. Her father's an avid golfer. He had read about Tess and brought his daughter down to meet her. That was one of the coolest things of that day. Matt, he requires some special equipment to get out and do it, but now there are places. Niagara has a unit like that for rent or even for free use, and so does Lake Ridge Links in Durham, and there's probably a few other places. But again, you can contact Todd if you have anyone interested in golf. You can contact the office, so we'll get you together. The dance program we've talked about. Again, when we talked about that tube where people enter the program, Alicia went in to teach this program, and when she said to the kids in this school, we're going to do dance, literally there was not one who volunteered to dance with her. And when she stayed in at recess and said, I'd like to talk to you, why don't you want to dance? And they all had, these were kids in grades 6 and 7, and they all had body image issues. And 3 months later, that class performed for the entire school on an anti-bullying dance, which was really cool. The girl in the bottom left is in a stroke recovery program. We talk about people entering our system. Thanks to phenomenal work that has mostly gone on out in London, Ontario. We have one of the best programs in Canada for helping people survive aneurysms, strokes, cerebral strokes, other things. And their road to recovery, quite frankly, when it happens, we don't know what kind of function they will get back, but the programs get stronger all the time. There's another picture of Tess. Here's one of my favorite ones where one of the dads of a kid at Grandview decided to make him a Halloween costume that he could be a Superman. So they built his Halloween costume around his power wheelchair, and that worked very well for him. Again, thank you for your participation tonight. We're not trying to get rid of you. We're here for questions, and there's a chat box, but we are trying to stay close to time. But thanks for your participation tonight. I can tell you that there's reasons that I do this. These are my 3 grandkids. The one on the far left, she's already fabulous and she'll let you know it. And the others are going to find their route, but we got to be there for them. And thank you everybody for your participation tonight. And Mercedes or Eric, if you have anything you want to close with, and then we can go to chat rooms.
Yeah, so we have time for a few questions here. So there was one question in the chat from Chantel wondering if you know of a place to get temporary / movable ramps.
Yes, Parasport will help you. It depends where you live, but some of the places, Motion Specialties has rental programs. So does Medigas, and Shoppers Home Healthcare used to, but they're out of that business now. But yeah, but if you contact us, we'll help you find a place for it.
Awesome. And then there's no other questions in the chat, but we do have a question here. In regards to this is in regards to the participation pyramid. So we got them started, we got them equipment. Now, what's the one best piece of advice to keep them in the pyramid, recreational or even high performance?
Actually, Todd talked on that. And if Vicky is here, Vicky is one of the best coaches maybe in the world for doing this. Because first of all, Vicky got people to actually believe that, swimming across Lake Huron was a good thing to do. So, that's Vicky, the coldest body of water that you've set a record in was Juan de Fuca, was it?
Juan de Fuca, 7 to 10 degrees Celsius, life expectancy an hour and a half. It took me 14 hours.
Okay. Just crazy stuff. I saw Vicky swim in a pool. I think it was 5 days straight without stop, trying to go to the bottom of the deep end to sit on the couch that she was pretty sure was down there. Seen her help a girl who showed up with quadruple amputee, meningocele septicemia. It's one thing that Vicky helped her swim with the competence that she swam across Lake Huron, I believe it was. Lake Erie or Lake Huron?
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie. Yeah. But more importantly, and Vicky, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that you were actually pretty much a mother to that person for a long period of time. But the fact is the level of independence, as someone who was just in the same facility, and I would see a girl literally both arms and legs amputated who was almost 100% independent.
She's now a mother of 3.
Pardon me?
She's now a mother of 3.
There we go.
Yeah.
And, it just incredible stuff. And Brian, as many of these stories as we do. You've grown up in the area. Sue, the people you've helped, it's phenomenal stuff. But again, we're not going anywhere. So if you have questions of any of the ambassadors, of each other, you're talking about people. I mean, you talk about Brad and Vicky. I can tell you, I knew Brad's grandparents very well, and the drive to help him drive from basically Orangeville to Variety Village, sometimes 3 times a week, was, he knows it, and he appreciates that they're the ones who made a difference in his life.
It's unreal the amount of time, like commitment that they had. And I look at all the medals I have and I'm just like, there's no, like, I'm not surprised why I had such success, because they put so much work and effort into getting me where I needed to be, whether it was Toronto. Like, I was driving to Toronto 4 days a week, and like, they were, I don't know, it was ridiculous the amount of driving those guys did. And then when they left, when they passed away, I saw just tons of, like, I just realized that they dedicated everything to me, and I'm glad that I got to help them see everything come to fruition in the end there, and it paid off. But yeah, you're right. It does take a lot of commitment, because some people won't even drive 20 minutes to a program. So,
it's amazing. When I went through my inventory of some of the scenarios, 4 families in the Toronto area that each adopted more than 10 kids with special needs. And Brian, you started when you were in 4 and 5 with a group of 5 children who were blind. And that group was amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe, Marissa, Jolan, Bradley, Todd, and all of our apprentices and mentors tonight. Lots of lessons learned tonight on how you can make your programs inclusive. We will be sending out the recording in the next few days, so you can watch at your leisure. If you are interested in staying around to mingle for a few minutes and ask the ambassadors any questions you may have, stay on. But for the rest of you, thank you once again. Have a great evening.
And one more thing, Eric.
Yes.
Thanks to Jeff Thiessen and the staff at Parasport Ontario, every one of you, and thanks to the Coaching Association of Ontario, every one of you is going to get a free copy of this book that is five decades of parasport. And the stories that are outlined in here are pretty cool. I had one of the co-op students who told me they didn't have anything to do for an hour, counted, and there's 1,054 names of para athletes mentioned in this book. So it's pretty cool.
That's incredible. No, thank you.
I'll get a free copy of it.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll definitely be sending that around to everyone. So thank you to Parasport. Thank you, Joe. So if there's any questions, if anyone wants to stick around and chat for a few extra minutes, we are here. The ambassadors will stay around for a few extra minutes. But if not, continue staying safe, and we'll be chatting soon.